Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Martyn Day. We start with the Ukraine update, day 1029. Donald Trump's incoming Ukraine envoy, retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, will travel to Kiev and several other European capitals in early January on a fact-finding trip. According to two sources with knowledge of planning, they said he would visit senior leaders in Kiev, and his team was working to set up meetings with leaders in other European capitals such as Rome and Paris, though plans could change. North Korean forces have taken several hundred casualties fighting against Ukrainian troops in Russia's Kursk region. According to a senior US military official, this would include everything from light wounds up to being killed in action. The official said, with soldiers of all ranks among the casualties, these are not battle-hardened troops, they haven't been in combat before. That is why they have been suffering the casualties that they have at the hands of the Ukrainians. Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, said Russia has used North Korean troops at the heart of an intensive offensive in Kursk over several days. Lieutenant General Igor Krylov, who was blown up in Moscow on Tuesday by Ukrainian intelligence, headed the Russian military's radiological, chemical and biological defence programme, a unit blamed by Ukraine, the US and UK for involvement in the use of chemicals on the battlefield. Ukrainian soldiers report a persistent use of chemical weapons, mostly tear gas, whose deployment on the battlefield is illegal. The US and UK go further in their accusations and say Russia is using another toxic agent, chlorprasine, first employed to gruesome effect in the trenches of the First World War. NATO has taken over as planned from the US in coordinating Western military aid to Ukraine, a source said on Tuesday, in a move widely seen as aiming to safeguard the support mechanism against Donald Trump. NATO's military headquarters, SHAPE, confirmed its Ukraine mission was assuming responsibilities from the US and international organisations. The work of NSATU is designed to place Ukraine in a position of strength, which puts NATO in a position of strength to keep safe and prosperous one of its billion people in both Europe and North America, said US Army General Christopher G. Gavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. This is a good day for Ukraine and a good day for NATO. The headquarters of NATO's new Ukraine mission, dubbed NATO Secretary Assistance and Training for Ukraine, NSATU, is located in Clay Barracks, a US base in the German town of Wiesbaden. It takes over from the US-led Ramstein Group. NSATU is said to have a total strength of about 700 personnel, including troops stationed in SHAPE in Belgium and logistics hubs in Poland and Romania. Diplomats acknowledge that benefits of the handover to NATO could be lessened if the US under Trump slashes support. The president-elect has previously threatened to pull out of NATO and invited Vladimir Putin to attack its members if they do not contribute more funding. On Tuesday, the UK sanctioned 20 ships it said had been carrying illicit Russian oil. The Ukrainian Air Force said on Tuesday it had downed 20 Russian-launched drones. It said on the Telegram Messenger that Russia had launched a total of 31 drones and an additional 10 did not reach their targets. We have a Middle East update where at least 45,097 Palestinians have been killed and 107,244 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. The Gaza Health Ministry said, of those, 38 Palestinians were killed and 203 injured in the latest 24 hours reporting period. A World Health Organization official said that Israeli attacks on northern Gaza's Camel Adwan hospital has left the facility without surgical or maternal care capacity. The fear endured by the hospital staff and patients in recent days is indescribable and unacceptable, she wrote on X. The US, joined by Arab mediators, is seeking to conclude a long-negotiated ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. A Palestinian official told Reuters earlier today that mediators had narrowed gaps on most of the agreement's clauses. He said Israel, however, had introduced conditions which Hamas rejected but would not elaborate. The IDF has issued more forced evacuation orders in Gaza despite increasing hope of ceasefire. The Israeli military has ordered another evacuation in central Gaza, even as Israel and Hamas appear to inch closer to a ceasefire agreement. This is an advance warning ahead of an offensive, Israeli military spokesman Avishai Adre posted on X. The order included 4 residential block areas in the urban refugee camp of Bruges, where Andreas claimed that Palestinian militants fired rockets towards Israel. He asked the residents to move to a so-called humanitarian zone in the Al-Mawseh area, which itself has been targeted by deadly Israeli airstrikes and is reportedly overcrowded. Turkish rescue workers have ended their search for survivors in the notorious Sedjanu prison, a facility for political prisoners nicknamed the Human Slaughterhouse on the outskirts of Damascus, after finding no detainees languishing in any hidden cells. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israeli troops will occupy a recently seized buffer zone in Syria for the foreseeable future. Israeli troops occupied the positions on the mountain when they moved into a demilitarized zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights after the collapse earlier this month of Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria. The White Helmets rescues have discovered unidentified bodies and remains in a medicine warehouse in a Damascus suburb. A Syrian civil defense official has said. UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen has called for free and fair elections in Syria and urged humanitarian assistance. Addressing reporters at the end of a visit to Damascus, Pedersen said, "There is a lot of hope that we can now see the beginning of a new Syria," which he expressed hope would also include a political solution in the Kurdish-held northeast. The UN envoy called for a new Syria that, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254, will adopt a new constitution, and that we have a free and fair elections when that time comes after a transitional period. UK inflation hits an 8-month high at 2.6%. UK inflation has risen to its highest level in 8 months, adding to pressure on the Bank of England to keep interest rates unchanged on Thursday, despite a slowdown in the UK economy. The Consumer Prices Index rose by 2.6% last month from 2.3% in October, driven by the rising cost of petrol and groceries and an increase in tobacco duty in the budget. The reading came from the Office for National Statistics, which matched City economists' forecasts, showed the headline rate rising further above the bank's 2% target for a second consecutive month. The ONS snapshot showed the average price of petrol rose by 0.8 pence a litre between October and November, stand at 134.8 pence a litre, while the price of diesel rose by 1.4 pence a litre to 140.5 pence. Airfares fell by 19.3% on the month, compared with the fall of 13.9% a year ago. Economists said the reading would all but guarantee the Bank of England keeps interest rates on hold at the current level of 4.75% on Thursday, amid concerns over persistently high inflation. Figures on Tuesday showed annual wage growth accelerated to 5.2% in October, adding to pressures on the bank to resist calls for a deduction in borrowing costs. Financial markets indicate a 90% probability of a hold decision. Rising inflation will make the bank's rate-setting Monetary Policy Committee nervous, said Thomas Pugh, an economist at the accountancy firm RSM UK, while the MPC won't want to drive the economy into stagnation or worse, an actual recession. The priority will be bearing down on inflation, given that consumers' inflation expectations are climbing again, even if that means a period of slower growth. The bank had forecast inflation would rise towards the end of the year after temporarily falling below 2% in September. Inflation has dropped from a peak of more than 11% in the second half of 2022 after Russia's invasion of Ukraine fueled a rise in energy prices. Separate figures on Wednesday showed total orders at UK factories had collapsed to the lowest level since the peak of the COVID pandemic in 2020. According to the CBI's Industrial Trends Survey, export orders fell along with domestic activity to leave a weighted balance of firms that said total orders were up versus those who said they were down at minus 40% from minus 19% in November. The SNP calls for a vote on UK government decision to reject WASPy women's compensation. The SNP has called for a vote on the Labour government decision to reject an ombudsman compensation recommendation for WASPy women. Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader, has written to leaders of other opposition parties to seek their support for a vote when Parliament returns in January. In his letter to Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey, Mr Flynn pressed both to use their Opposition Day allocations to force a vote. It comes as the Labour government faced a fierce backlash from campaigners after U-turning on a commitment to compensate the 3.6 million women impacted by the DWP's failure to adequately inform them of state pension aid changes. In March, the Ombudsman's report found that some women lost opportunities to make informed decisions about their finances and recommended that compensation be paid out. In opposition, virtually every single senior Labour politician from Sir Keir Starmer to Liz Kendall committed to WASPy justice, while Scottish Labour figures including Anna Sarwar and Ian Murray were also unequivocal in their support. Yesterday, Mr Flynn was the first MP to demand a vote on the matter in a scathing question to Labour's Liz Kendall as she detailed plans to betray WASPy campaigners. Commenting on his bid for a House of Commons vote to see compensation paid out, Mr Flynn said, "WASPy women have been betrayed by the Labour Party, but the fight doesn't end here. Sir Keir Starmer must follow the compensation recommendation of the independent Ombudsman, and the SNP will try to force the vote to make that happen. In that respect, I've written to the other party leaders to ask them to help by using their parliamentary time to debate and vote on justice for the WASPy women. It's a complete disgrace that Labour Party politicians posed with WASPy women before the election only to leave them high and dry when they got into government. It's the very worst of politics." Not content with robbing pensioners from their winter fuel payment or maintaining the two-child cap, the Labour government has now shamefully betrayed WASPy women, the same Labour Party who laughably told us that they wanted to restore trust in politics. The SNP has been unwavering in our support for the women impacted, and we are not prepared to give up the fight now. I call on other party leaders in Westminster to join me in those efforts by forcing the Labour Party into the voting lobbies. LSE finds that Brexit cost the UK $27 billion in lost trade in the first 2 years. The damage from Brexit to trade links with the EU cost the UK $27 billion in the first 2 years, but the overall impact was more limited than forecasters first estimated. According to the most comprehensive review of the issue since Britain fully left the bloc at the start of 2021. Researchers based at the London School of Economics found that trade barriers had been a disaster for small businesses and had forced thousands to stop trading with EU nations. The academics from the Centre for Economic Performance looked at evidence from more than 100,000 firms and found that by the end of 2022, 2 years after the UK signed the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with Brussels, total British goods exports had fallen by 6.4% and imports by 3.1%. An assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, has forecast that the UK will suffer a 15% slump in trade, leading to a 4% reduction in national income over the longer term. The UK is due to start negotiations next year on the next phase of the TCA. Ministers are expected to resist calls for the UK to open its agricultural markets to competition from the EU farmers and fishing trawlers in return for greater access for UK goods to the bloc. Examining the first 2 years of the TCA, the authors said it was clear large firms had mostly carried on trading at the same level with EU partners. However, smaller exporters, those with fewer than 100 employees, had suffered badly. More than 14,000 of the 100,000 firms examined had quit trading with the EU altogether. Almost all were smaller businesses. The research is the first to study the impact of Brexit on trade using customs records collected by HMRC. Researchers said the customs data allowed them to view individual businesses' relationships and highlight how larger firms have adjusted to the new trade relationships better than small and medium-sized firms. TCA did not include tariffs, but it did introduce barriers to trade such as customs checks and paperwork, rules of origin requirements, excise duties, sanitary and psychosanitary checks on the movement of animals and plants, and the need for exporters to prove their products comply with regulations in their destination market. However, many of these checks have been repeatedly delayed, with further measures still to come into effect next year. The study examined only the trade in goods and not the import and export of services, which mostly lay outside the jurisdiction of the single market and customs union. The report found that the UK's exit from the EU single market and customs union at the start of 2021 had led to immediate declines in export and imports with the EU. Uber and its CEO have donated $1 million each to Trump's inaugural fund. Uber and its CEO have donated $1 million to the Donald Trump Inauguration Fund, joining a growing list of tech companies and executives seeking to foster a favourable relationship with the incoming administration. A spokesperson for Uber Technologies confirmed to the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday that both Uber and its CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, each donated £1 million to Trump's fund. Uber previously donated $1 million to President Biden's inauguration in 2021, but Khosrowshahi did not donate to that event, according to the Wall Street Journal. The $1 million donation to Trump's fund, the newspaper states, is Khosrowshahi's largest donation to a political candidate or inauguration fund. The donations from Uber and Khosrowshahi add to a growing list of tech companies and executives who have donated or have said that they intend to donate $1 million to the President-elect's inaugural fund. Last week, Meta confirmed that it had donated $1 million to the fund. OpenAI also confirmed its CEO Sam Altman was planning to make a $1 million personal donation to the fund. Amazon is also preparing a donation of $1 million to Trump's fund. Uber and Khosrowshahi do not have the same historically tense relationship with Trump as companies and executives such as Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, and Jeff Bezos, which is what made those donations particularly significant. Donations to the inaugural committees are not uncommon among large businesses aiming to establish better relationships with the new administrations. The donations from tech companies and tech executives in the last month come as the inaugural administration is reportedly offering perks to the top donors to the President-elect's inaugural fund. It's also at the same time that Trump has been meeting and dining with several tech executives since winning the election. In the last month or so, Trump has dined at his Mar-a-Lago estate with Meta's CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Apple CEO Tim Cook, and Google's Sundar Pichai and Sergey Brin. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is slated to dine with Trump this week. House Ethics Committee votes to release report on sexual misconduct allegations against Matt Gaetz. The US House of Representatives Ethics Committee is reported to have voted to release a report on sexual misconduct allegations against Matt Gaetz, the former Republican representative, who was forced to drop his bid to become Donald Trump's Attorney General amid fallout over the accusations. According to CNN, the House Ethics Committee voted earlier this month to release the report, which is expected to be made public after the Chamber's final votes of the year later this week. The news comes a month after the committee deadlocked on whether to release the report, as members fell along party lines in the private vote. The recent decision now suggests that at least one Republican member of the panel has joined Democrats in supporting its publication. Gaetz is accused of engaging in a sexual relationship with an underage girl who reportedly told the Ethics Committee that she had 2 sexual encounters with him at a party in 2017. Gaetz has consistently denied the allegations, and the Justice Department declined to charge him last year as part of a sex trafficking investigation. The committee's decision to release its report is noteworthy given that Gaetz is no longer a member of the House or a cabinet nominee. Gaetz, a hard-right representative from Florida, known for making enemies on both sides of the aisle, withdrew from consideration to be Trump's Attorney General last month. Gov is investing in schools and education. First Minister John Swinney has officially opened 2 new schools in Dunfermline, which were supported by $53.4 million of Scottish Government investment. Based within the new state-of-the-art Dunfermline Learning Campus, St Columba's RC and Woodmill High School will provide education opportunities from primary school all the way through to college. The campus will also be home to the new Fife College, which is expected to open in early 2026. If the Scottish Parliament votes for the 25-26 budget, it will ensure councils share a record funding settlement of more than $15 billion, which will help provide vital support for schools and education. The opening of the 2 new schools also adds to the proportion of schools in good or satisfactory condition, which has increased from 62.7% in April 2007 to 91.7% in April 2024. The increasing number of high-quality school buildings is supported by the Scottish Government's $2 billion Learning Estate investment programme, delivered in partnership with local authorities. A further 9 school projects included in the programme will open in 2025 to 26. First Minister John Swinney said, "Investing in our children's education is one of the most important investments we can make, and my government is determined to continue to deliver progress in education. The pupils of the 2 schools on the Dunfermline Learning Campus will be learning in state-of-the-art modern facilities. It is my pleasure to officially open the schools within the Dunfermline Learning Campus and to see this fantastic facility come to life, which has been supported by over $53 million of Scottish Government investment. There is so much to be proud of in the Scottish education, with literacy and numeracy at record high and record numbers of our young people going on to university. Our budget will invest to ensure we can continue this progress. That is why I'm calling on Parliament to unite behind the budget and ensure we can drive further improvements in our schools and deliver our young people. Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth said, "The Dunfermline Learning Campus is a key example of the Scottish Government in partnership with local authorities delivering for local communities through the $2 billion leap for the pupils attending these schools. This campus will be transformative for their education, for the families and for their future. I'm really pleased to see that community initiatives have been a focus during the building period. 814 weeks of apprenticeships have been supported for local young people and more than £56,000 donated to local community groups, putting community and social value at the heart of the campus." Scottish Government has unveiled 2030 route map to a circular economy. Actions aimed at ensuring households and businesses in Scotland boost reuse and recycling rates and cut waste have been published. The Circular Economy and Waste Route Map sets out 11 priority areas where efforts and resources will be concentrated to support a transition to a circular economy, where resources are kept in use for as long as possible. They include setting new circular economy targets, reducing the amount of food waste produced, developing a model for regional hubs and networks for the reuse and construction materials and assets, improving the provision of recycling and waste services, minimising the carbon impacts of the energy from waste sector. Route Map is the product of extensive collaboration and engagement with the public, private and third sectors through 2 consultations since 2022, with consistently high levels of support for the proposals. The overall recycling rate in Scotland is at its highest level since records began in 2011, and the actions of the Route Map complement provisions in the Circular Economy Scotland Act 2024, which was passed unanimously by MSPs in June. Acting Net Zero Secretary Gillian Martyn launched the Route Map at a visit to Grassmarket Community Project in Edinburgh, which upcycles discarded wooden furniture into new items. She said, "Reusing and recycling materials has a huge role to play in Scotland's response to tackling the climate crisis. We must make the circular option where we value materials and keep them in use for as long as possible, either in their original form or recycled. An easier choice for Scottish households, businesses and the public sector. The Route Map sets out an ambitious plan to help make this a reality. I want to thank all those who have contributed to its development. There have been consistently high levels of support for its actions, which promote and support responsible production and consumption, along with the sustainable management of Scotland's resources, and the final Route Map will be key to supporting the Scottish Government's net zero and economic growth goals." A National Flood Advisory Service will be established to improve Scotland's flood resilience and embed best practice on a nationwide scale. The service is one of the actions in Scotland's first National Flood Resilience Strategy, published today. It will provide support and advice on building flood resilience to delivery partners and communities, and provide the governance framework for progressing high-value flood actions such as flood protection schemes. Other key actions include work to improve our understanding of how urban and rural landscapes can be adapted for flood mitigation, support for a broader range of flood actions including smaller flood protection schemes and property-level flood resilience, the improvements to how data is used to inform decision-making and raise community awareness of the current and future flood exposure. The scale of the challenge Scotland faces in response to climate change means that actions within the strategy are designed to extend beyond fixing individual flooding problems to creating flood-resilient places and communities. An additional £15 million has been set aside in the draft 2020 2025 to 26 Scottish Budget to support the delivery of the strategy, water flooding resilience and coastal adaptation work. Acting Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Energy, Gillian Martyn, said, "Floods like we saw in October 2023 during Storm Babbitt show that global warming is already influencing weather events in Scotland. Over the coming decades, we will see greater economic, social and environmental impacts as sea levels rise and rainfall intensities, and the rivers' flows increase because of climate change. By 2080, it is estimated that the number of properties at risk of flooding in Scotland could rise from 284,000 to almost 400,000. Our national flood resilience strategy, therefore puts communities before its heart, with a focus on building community flood resilience and reducing the impacts of flooding on people, businesses and housing. It supports an increase in the range and rate of delivery of actions, both to manage our flood exposure and to reduce the impacts of flooding when it does occur. This builds on work already underway to create more flood resilient places. In addition to the 42 million we provide annually to local authorities for flood resilience, we have committed an additional 150 million over the course of this Parliament to deliver improved flood resilience, and we propose to commit a further 15 million as part of our draft budget for 2025-26. The strategy will be delivered via an implementation plan that will take forward policy development for 6 priority areas, starting with the establishment of the Flood Advisory Service. Health Secretary Neil Gray visited the Scottish Ambulance Service's Edinburgh City Station ahead of the busy festive period to express gratitude for the hard work and dedication to delivering vital services during challenging times. He encouraged people to use healthcare services appropriately this Christmas and New Year and only dial 999 for genuine emergencies. An additional 1,388 paramedics and call handlers have been recruited following workforce investment since 2020, with further recruitment underway. Senior paramedics at an integrated clinical hub review all emergency calls to prevent unnecessary ambulance journeys and ensure only patients needing A&E care are taken to hospital. Mr. Gray said, "The festive season is always a challenging time for health and care services, and the incredible team at the Scottish Ambulance Service is rising to meet this challenge head-on. I want to thank all staff for their hard work and dedication, especially at this time of year. In a life-threatening emergency, always dial 999. However, everyone should familiarise themselves with advice on the best way to access health services, such as NHS Informs online tools, to get the right care quickly and ensure that services such as the ambulance service can focus on those who need urgent care." The 2025-26 Scottish Budget, if agreed by the Scottish Parliament, will provide record funding of £21 billion to health and social care. This includes an increase to the Scottish Ambulance Service of more than £88 million. This will help the service continue to develop, enhance capacity and deliver high-quality patient care across Scotland. I urge Parliament to get behind the budget to unlock this funding. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We set our current fundraising target in April, hoping to reach 36,000 by the end of the year. It is now December and we have raised over 19.6 thousand, just half of our target. However, to pay our bills and survive, we urgently need to raise at least 12,000. We have borrowed 12,000 to enable us to survive for now, but the pressure is still on and we do need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around 2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. We are at crisis point and really need to increase our donations to be able to pay our bills and survive. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you, and thank you again to our usual guests. We had none tonight. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.